in the economy lost. This could have been prevented. This whole pandemic, not only controlled, but it could have been prevented. And it's very simple. When we had the SARS epidemic 18 years ago, and MERS 9 years ago, SARS was a terrible disease. It had a very high mortality rate, but it was self-contained because you weren't infectious until you had symptoms of the disease. COVID is much worse because you can spread the disease asymptomatically. But when the SARS epidemic first struck in Hong Kong and then in Toronto and a few other cities, there was a flurry of interest in the virus, coronavirus, and for an initial attempt to make a vaccine. But then they were able to, public health measures were able to control and eventually eliminate the disease, essentially. And so the pharmaceutical industry no longer had any incentive to develop drugs. I mean, chemical drugs to inhibit the virus. And, viruses like the coronaviruses, there are many different coronaviruses, and they're all immunologically distinct. They have different surface antigens. So a vaccine that would have worked on SARS almost certainly would not have worked on SARS-CoV-2. So you can't, no one has a universal coronavirus vaccine, just like there's no universal flu vaccine. But with chemical therapies, the viral genes that are necessary for viral replication are not so free to mutate to become resistant to drugs. And so I think it would be possible to find a drug or a cocktail of drugs that completely inactivates most coronaviruses, just like we have with HIV. There's never been a successful vaccine for HIV because its surface changes so rapidly during the infection process that your body simply cannot mount an immune reaction. But with a cocktail of drugs, you can wipe the virus out completely. And I think if there had been a concerted public-private effort with the foreknowledge that eventually there would be an outbreak of coronavirus that was really deadly, as we're now experiencing, if that work had gone on during the previous 18 years, we would have had a drug or a cocktail of drugs to completely eliminate the disease right away. So that's a tragic failure of insight and investment, which we simply cannot afford to do again. We cannot make that mistake. And I think now, as a result of this pandemic, we will have a cocktail of drugs to keep at least another coronavirus infection from spreading like this. And so there needs to be an investment in universities, through the government, and in the pharmaceutical industry to develop a more complete set of drugs to block infectious agents, bacterial and viral. Because because the alternative is what we're suffering now. So,
but do you think it could be a vaccine or just some?
Well, people have said that they're trying to make a pan vaccine that would block all coronaviruses, but I'm dubious. I mean, people have been trying for over 30 years to get a vaccine against HIV. So I'm dubious. But with drugs, you can have a cocktail of drugs, as with HIV, 3 different drugs targeting different core components of the viral replication machinery is, virtually 100% effective. And we could have had that for coronavirus now if the investment had been made. Because, the investment would have been billions and billions of dollars, but the cost of failure has been trillions of dollars.